Shanghai Pete and the ghastly GameStop. Way back in the day, in an age long gone and best forgotten, I spent about 2 miserable years managing a GameStop. Those of you paying perhaps a bit too much attention to all the dumb shit I say over here may remember me mentioning that. For anyone else, well, now you know. I could probably do an entire documentary video series about all the shit that went down at my store and all the idiotic and often downright illegal insanity my friends and I got up to back then, but that would have to wait for another time. The reason it's relevant today, however, is because managing that terrible little GameStop afforded me many opportunities to directly interact with Microsoft people and became a big part of what would be my formative impressions of Microsoft in the games industry. Now, at first, this probably won't surprise anybody, I was one of those assholes that hated on Halo and refused to acknowledge even a single positive thing about the first Xbox. I was still pissed about what happened with Sega and the Dreamcast, and the last thing I was going to accept was a company like Microsoft, of all people, essentially just buying their way into the industry. I didn't care about the specs of the console, or that cartoonish abomination of a controller, or anything else. To me and many of my friends at the time, they were nothing more than a usurper trying to smuggle themselves into the gaming space under the cover of Sega's Death Shroud. And to be honest, I'm still not totally over it. Back then though, while I was managing that GameStop, 2 things created a small chink in my resolve that eventually widened enough to allow a reluctant tolerance and subsequent acceptance of Microsoft to infiltrate. Now, the first was the way that anyone from Microsoft, including the Xbox reps that visited my store every few weeks, treated me and my employees. Now, the Nintendo reps were always, you can probably imagine, they're always these cringy, try-hard pricks brimming with insincerity and an almost willful ignorance of the products that they were supposed to be promoting. The Sony reps were even worse. Imagine if, like, the Chad Bro Chill or Johnny Sixpack from your high school ended up selling PlayStation shit. You know, Sony Polo tucked too far into freshly ironed khakis, flip phone clipped to their belt, you know, these guys grinning with the smug arrogance of a used car salesman, but speaking with the casual, practiced hostility of an entitled brat who spent his high school weekends doing blow and date raping in the backseat of his parents' BMW. Those kind of guys. Now, few things are worse than someone who lets the minuscule amount of power wielded by a Sony GameStop rep to go to their head. The Xbox guys are the only ones who are always courteous, polite, helpful, and displayed a genuine affection and interest for their products. Or if they were just pretending to, they were fucking good at it. They would always show up with new games and stuff for the store's Xbox Interact, plus tons of swag and shit from me and my employees. They actively made me want to like them and Xbox. I realize that's a low bar, but they did clear it when so many did not. And later when I went to the GameStop Managers Conference that year, that same sincerity and genuine desire to offer a product that customers would actually find valuable was demonstrated all over in every Microsoft showcase and event. Now, just as a brief aside for those of you who don't know, back in the day, I don't know if it still is like this, the GameStop Managers Conference was like a mini E3 put on by the industry just for GameStop management. It was fucking crazy. Took place over like 3 days across a huge area of some super fancy hotel in Texas, whose name I am forgetting. Waldorf, maybe? I don't know. All I remember is it was fancy enough for me to feel slightly uncomfortable. Anyway, throughout my time there, Microsoft was the only company that made any sort of effort to actually sell us on their brand or displayed any genuine interest in video games at all. Their guys would constantly go out of their way and above and beyond to solve any issue or address any problems that we had. You need an extra copy of that game we're handing out? No problem. You want more of those shirts for your employees? Sure thing. Require special accommodations for a product launch or pre-order incentives? We got you. I came away from that event thinking, god damn, Sony and Nintendo really don't give a fuck about anything except ensuring their shit sells. They even treat the people whose job it is to sell their shit like shit. Only Microsoft seem like they give a fuck at all about gamers, about the industry, their customers, or even me. Now, understandably, your initial reaction to this little anecdote might be to think, so fucking what? Microsoft and Xbox were still the new kids on the block, and they were overcompensating in an effort to ingratiate themselves with GameStop, the biggest game retailer at the time. Big deal. And to be fair, yeah, I'm sure that's exactly what they were doing. But when you're in the trenches on the front lines running a GameStop and you're forced to come face to face with the madness of unwatched humanity and all their disgusting, self-serving, entitled glory day in and day out, anyone who makes that even slightly more pleasant or tolerable leaves a pretty good impression on you. Now, I didn't give a shit why Microsoft guys were so helpful or efficient to deal with, only that they were, and that doing so made my absolute nightmare of a job easier. They actually tried. I'll take Microsoft pretending to care over Sony and Nintendo actively not caring any day. None of this makes Microsoft a paragon of virtue or a faultless gaming institution by any means. I mean, still fuck them. But it was enough to slightly soften my impression of them. And once I wasn't actively hostile to the idea of Xbox, it was only a matter of time until all those co-op FPSs that were released for it finally wore me down enough to start fucking with it. Actually, it was probably mainly just the FPSs. In an era where Wi-Fi routers were relatively new and shitty technology and our PCs still used enormous CRT monitors, being able to play co-op FPSs on the couch with all your boys using just a TV and an Xbox, it was a pretty big deal. Now, I would, and still do, view Microsoft as an unwanted intruder on the industry, but years of watching Sony display an attitude of casual indifference and occasionally even outright spite or derision for their fans and customers put their approach to this business in stark contrast with the decidedly more customer-friendly conduct of Microsoft. Again, to be clear, I still think they're both monstrous vehicles for predatory capitalism that wouldn't hesitate to take your last dollar if you let them. Only that it's been my experience that Microsoft cares just a little bit more about not immediately appearing that way. Whether this is because they have significantly more operating capital than Sony and are therefore less risk averse, or because they're more often caught on the back foot each generation, I can't tell you, I don't know. What I can tell you though is that for better or worse, when it comes to gaming, the company I think more likely to pull some anti-consumer fuck shit, it's definitely Sony. Remember our previous lessons from Nuances for Dummies though. This is not me saying Microsoft are the good guys and Sony are the bad guys. They're both the bad guys without a doubt. I just think Sony has a worse record when it comes to pulling shady anti-consumer moves. I don't trust either of these companies, but I do trust Sony less.
Woke up, smoke up, blunt, then I pass out. Pass out. Woke up, what up, smoke up, blunt, then I'm back down. Back down. What? Woke up, smoke up, blunt, then I pass out. Pass out. Woke up, what up, smoke up, blunt, then I'm